The Unbreakable Spirit, The Tragic Tale of Max. Prologue. The night was cold, the sky painted in shades of black and gray. A weak whimper echoed through the empty streets, but no one listened. Beneath a broken dumpster, a dog lay curled up, his golden fur turned into a dull, mud-caked mess. His ribs jutted out painfully from his thin body, and his breath was slow, labored. Once he had a name, once he had a home. Now he had nothing. This is Max's story, one of suffering, survival, and a spirit that refused to break. A life of chains and suffering. Max had been born into the world with hope. He and his siblings were tiny, blind and warm, nestled against their mother's soft fur. She was a gentle Labrador mix, and though she was a stray, she did her best to protect them. But fate was cruel. One day, as the puppies suckled their mother's milk, the barn doors were thrown open. Heavy boots stomped inside. A rough voice sneered, "More damn strays." A pair of filthy hands snatched up the puppies, stuffing them into a burlap sack. Their mother barked, growling, trying to defend them, but a sharp kick to her ribs sent her yelping to the ground. "Shut up, mutt," the man spat before walking out, tossing the bag into the back of his truck. The puppies cried, terrified, their tiny bodies tumbling over one another as the truck rumbled down the road. One by one they were sold. Max ended up in the hands of a man named Victor. Victor wasn't looking for a companion. He was looking for an object, a thing to guard his junkyard. Max was thrown into a filthy backyard, tied to a rusted chain. The first night he cried. The second night, he learned crying only brought pain. "Shut up, you stupid mutt!" Victor roared, slamming a boot into Max's tiny ribs. The puppy yelped, his small body skidding across the ground. Victor laughed, pathetic. The days turned to weeks, the weeks into months. Max grew, but so did his misery. He was barely given food, surviving on moldy bread and dirty water. Whenever Victor was in a bad mood, Max paid the price. A kick here, a slap there, sometimes worse. One night, Victor came home, drunk and furious. He stormed into the backyard, stumbling over his own feet. "You useless piece of garbage," he slurred, grabbing a belt from his waist. "What good are you? You don't bark, you don't bite, you don't do anything." The belt came down, once, twice, over and over. Max whimpered, curling into a ball. The blows didn't stop. When Victor was finally done, he tossed the belt aside, panting. "Tomorrow," he muttered, "I'm getting rid of you." Max lay in the dirt, his body aching, blood staining his golden fur. He didn't understand why. He didn't understand what he had done to deserve this. But tomorrow would be worse. The night of abandonment. The truck ride was long and bumpy. Max was thrown into the back, his legs tied. He couldn't move, couldn't escape. Victor drove into the forest, stopping in the middle of nowhere. He grabbed Max by the scruff and dragged him out, tossing him onto the cold ground. "Let's see how long you last," Victor muttered, kicking dirt over Max's body before climbing back into the truck and speeding off. Max struggled against the ropes. He tried to bark, to call for help, but his voice was weak. The forest was dark, filled with strange sounds. The wind whispered through the trees. The distant cries of animals sent shivers down Max's spine. For days he wandered. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. His throat burned with thirst. He tried to eat leaves, but they made him sick. He drank from puddles, his body shivering from the cold. Then the boys came. They found him near a creek, his frail body barely moving. "Hey, look at this thing," one of them sneered. Max lifted his head weakly. His tail gave the smallest wag. Maybe they would help him. Maybe they would... A rock struck his side. He whimpered. Another rock. Then another. Pain exploded through his ribs. "Let's see if we can make it run," one of the boys laughed, grabbing a stick. He swung it down hard, cracking against Max's back. Max cried out, trying to crawl away, but another kick sent him rolling. "Not so tough, huh?" Then one of them pulled out a rope. "Let's tie it up. Maybe we can drag it down the hill." They laughed, tightening the rope around Max's legs. He struggled, but he was too weak. Just as they were about to pull, a voice rang out. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" A woman stood at the edge of the trees, her face twisted in fury. The angel named Sarah. Sarah had always rescued animals, but nothing had prepared her for the sight before her. A broken, bleeding dog. Boys standing over him, ropes in their hands. Her blood boiled. "You disgusting little monsters!" she hissed, storming toward them. The boys panicked. They dropped the rope, stumbling back. We weren't doing anything. Get out!" They ran. Sarah knelt beside Max, her heart breaking. "Oh, baby," she whispered, gently touching his fur. He flinched. He had learned that hands only brought pain. Tears burned her eyes. "You're safe now," she promised. Lifting him into her arms, she carried him to her car, whispering soft reassurances the whole way. The road to recovery. The vet's prognosis was grim. Severe malnutrition. Multiple fractures. Signs of prolonged abuse. He may not survive. But Sarah refused to give up. She stayed by his side, feeding him small bites, cleaning his wounds, whispering to him in the dark. For weeks, he didn't move much, but then, one night, his tail wagged, just once. Sarah cried. Slowly, Max healed. He learned that hands could bring kindness, that voices didn't always shout, that love was real. The Unbreakable Spirit, Max's Redemption, Part 2. A familiar nightmare. It had been a year since Sarah rescued Max. His golden fur had grown back, soft and healthy. His eyes, once filled with fear, now held warmth and trust. He had a home, love, and security. But one night something changed. Max and Sarah were walking through the park when a sharp, cruel voice echoed behind them. "Well, well, look at this," the voice sneered. "Didn't think I'd see you again, mutt." Max froze. His breath hitched. That voice. He turned slowly, his body trembling. Victor. His old owner stood just a few feet away, smirking. His greasy hair clung to his forehead, and the stench of alcohol hung around him like a cloud. His eyes locked onto Max, filled with the same cold cruelty Max had once known too well. Sarah stepped protectively in front of Max. "Do you know him?" she asked, sensing Max's fear. Victor chuckled. "Know him? This piece of trash used to be mine." Max lowered his head, a low whimper escaping his throat. The memories came rushing back, the chain, the beatings, the hunger. Victor took a step forward, his voice mocking. "Bet you still remember me, huh? Yeah, I see it in your eyes. You're still the same weak, pathetic mutt." Sarah's hands curled into fists. "You abused him, didn't you?" Victor shrugged. "I trained him. If he was too weak to handle it, that's his fault." Rage boiled inside Sarah. "Stay away from us!" Victor smirked. "Oh, I'm not done yet." Suddenly, he lunged forward. Max reacted before he could think. The fear that had paralyzed him shattered. He growled, a deep, fierce sound he had never made before. Victor hesitated. "Oh, you grew a spine now?" Max didn't back down. He bared his teeth, stepping in front of Sarah. This time he wouldn't run. This time he wouldn't be the victim. Victor sneered, but took a step back. "Whatever. Keep your damn mutt." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Sarah knelt beside Max, running a soothing hand over his fur. "You're safe," she whispered. "He's never going to hurt you again." Max leaned into her touch. For the first time in his life, he truly believed it. But something told him, this wasn't over yet, the darkest hour. The days passed, but Max couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked. He was more alert now, sensing every shadow, listening for every sound. And then one night the nightmare returned. It was late when Sarah heard something outside. A faint rustling near the back door. Max was already awake, his ears perked, his body stiff. A loud bang! The back door shook. Someone was trying to break in. Sarah grabbed her phone, her heart racing. "Stay here, Max," she whispered, reaching for the light switch. But before she could call for help, the door burst open. And there he was, Victor. He held a rusted crowbar, his eyes wild with rage. "You think you can take what's mine?" he snarled. Sarah gasped, stepping back. "Get out of my house." Victor laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't take orders from you." He took a menacing step forward. "I want my dog back." Max stood between them, his body tense, his growl deep and threatening. Victor scowled. "Move, mutt." Max didn't move. Victor raised the crowbar. I said move! Everything happened in a blur. Victor swung, Max lunged. The impact was brutal. Max bit down on Victor's arm, his teeth sinking deep. Victor howled in pain, dropping the crowbar. Sarah grabbed a pan from the counter and swung it with all her strength. Clang. The metal connected with Victor's head, sending him crashing to the floor. Blood dripped from his arm as he groaned, dazed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah had managed to hit the emergency button on her phone. Minutes later, the police stormed in, weapons drawn. Victor barely had time to react before he was pinned to the ground, handcuffed. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer said, hauling him up. Victor glared at Max. "I'll get you for this, mutt." Max didn't flinch. He stood tall, unwavering. This time, Victor was the one who lost. A hero's redemption. The news spread quickly. "Rescue dog saves owner from intruder." The story went viral. People across the country praised Max's bravery. Messages flooded in, calling him a hero. But for Max, the true victory wasn't the fame. It was the moment he lay beside Sarah that night, his head resting on her lap, feeling safe. For the first time, he knew his past no longer controlled him. He had faced his demons, and he had won, because Max wasn't just a survivor. He was a warrior,